Dave and Dujanovic.
All right, here we go.
Dave and Dujanovic, Utah's all-new nighttime companions on KSL News Radio 102.7 FM and 1160 AM.
Hey, welcome on into the show. Dave Noriega and Debbie Dujanovic. Just over a week left in the legislative session. And for professional drivers, they may have some strange requirements now attached to getting their licenses, and it has nothing to do with vehicle safety.
It has everything to do with this.
Sex trafficking is a form of modern-day slavery. It's when traffickers are using force, fraud, or coercion to compel an individual to engage in commercial sex.
Should truck drivers in Utah be required to pass a human trafficking awareness test before they can get their commercial driver's license?
Yes.
Oh, hold your horses
no.
there.
It should be. These are the two people responsible for fixing this problem: truck drivers and dog walkers. If it's not those two, I don't know any idea how we're going to fix this problem.
It is a problem.
Truck drivers,
there's no
dog
question.
walkers, Deb.
But we're going to get into that debate. It's a test that'll teach them how to spot sex trafficking victims when they're driving around or at truck stops. And it's interesting what you learn when you start researching a subject just by going to Google.
You love the Google.
I didn't know there was an entire group dedicated to, and it's called Truckers Against Trafficking. And they put together a 30-minute video online, and here's a clip.
If you ever see a minor selling commercial sex, by federal definition, that is a child, that is a victim of human trafficking. There is no such thing as a child prostitute.
And Representative Todd Weiler here in the state of Utah is sponsoring legislation right now on Utah's Capitol Hill. He wants to get truck drivers on board with watching out for sex trafficking as they pull into truck stops. We talked to him a little bit earlier.
The bill would require commercial truck drivers, as part of their renewal of their CDL licenses, to go online and view a 30-minute course that's put on by Truckers Against Trafficking, that would basically educate them as to what to look for, what signs to look for to help call in law enforcement tips about human trafficking.
And Weiler says, you know what? This program is working, and that's why he wants to make it mandatory for truck drivers here in Utah to take a test to make them more aware of the signs of sex trafficking and human trafficking. So if they pull into a truck stop and they see perhaps a group of young girls in a car with an older man and it looks suspicious, they call it in.
Truckers Against Trafficking has been tremendously successful. Out of about 1,950 tips that were called in, over 1,000 individuals have been rescued from human trafficking. So we're just trying to get more truckers involved in the training.
And guess what truckers are saying? Why does this have to fall on us?
It's a government mandate. A lot of truckers are saying, why are you picking on me? You don't make anybody take this training. But what we found is, as these victims of human trafficking are moved around the state and the country, they often end up at truck stops and other places where truckers frequent.
And if it's truck stops, and if truckers kind of crack down on the truck stops, they'll move elsewhere. It's not just happening here. And I understand if this is where the problem's at, then absolutely let's address it. But I don't like the idea of mandating it because, again, the truck drivers have a very important job to do. This has nothing to do with what their job is.
Hauling 80,000 pounds of fuel, maybe?
Yeah, exactly. And I want them to focus on their job. Now, if this is something, instead of mandating it, why can't we incentivize stuff? And I think we don't incentivize enough stuff. If we want someone to make this a cause, if we want them to pitch in, then why not say, this is an option. You can take this human trafficking test, and then how do you incentivize it? You say you pass the test, you report something. If it leads to a conviction, then we will give you a reward. You'll get $5,000. We'll give you $10,000. It's cheaper than having to hire a whole bunch of extra police or a task force. I just don't understand why we're mandating it. Why can't we incentivize it?
We're talking about the legislation that you probably haven't heard about on Utah's Capitol Hill. It has to do with Utah's truck drivers being mandated, if this bill passes, to take a test about human trafficking awareness. So when they pull into truck stops and when they're driving on our freeways, they can spot signs of human trafficking. There is already a video online about this. There is a group that is gaining momentum. It's called Truckers Against Trafficking. And here's what they want truckers to look for as they're pulling into truck stops.
So if you're in a parked location and you happen to see lights that are flashing, perhaps signaling that somebody is saying, I'm an available buyer, that should be a red flag. If you happen to hear CB chatter about commercial company or somebody needing to make a quota or somebody referencing their daddy or that boyfriend figure in their life, or if you're that local driver who is loading at a business front and you happen to see that unaccompanied minor or that minor who looks fearful or potentially is under the control of somebody else. What about branding? Do you see some tattoos claiming ownership over this person? This is a potential sign that you are interacting with a human trafficking victim.
And when we push this responsibility on to truck drivers, we take the responsibility off of the legislature to create a comprehensive plan to deal with something that we've been told is a real problem and is widespread, and we need to do everything we can to stop it. No doubt. No one who is a mom or dad or a grandparent is going to say, hey, yeah, child sex trafficking, that's okay. Nobody agrees with that. No. But what the legislature does by just putting a Band-Aid on it and throwing the responsibility onto people like truck drivers who didn't ask for this responsibility, right. They've got other things to do, is they've then made us feel like they're taking care of the problem or they're dealing with the problem when they're really not. And we need a comprehensive approach to this if they can show us that this is a real problem that needs a statewide task force with 30, 40, 50 officers who have law enforcement capabilities and can do some real investigating. And the things that she's talking about there sound like the things that cops are looking for.
Yeah, exactly. And I like that there's a grassroots effort. I like that the truckers are talking amongst themselves and saying, hey, these are the signs, these are the things we need to look out for. I like that they're doing that. I just never like the idea of mandating something, of legislating something for an employee or an occupation that has nothing to do with their job. That just seems so wrong to me. I made the quip, I made the joke earlier. It's up to dog walkers and truckers to fix the human trafficking problem. Why? I mean, just because it happens or it tends to frequent these areas, I just don't think you can pick on truckers and say, listen, this is your responsibility now. It doesn't make any sense to me. Now, I want people to be involved. I want people to be aware. I love that there's truckers that are out there saying, you know what? We're going to start talking about this amongst ourselves. We're going to keep an eye out for it. We're going to call the police when we see something. I like that. But again, incentivize it. Pay them a reward if they find someone. Then that is something that would maybe get people excited about, you know what? I'm going to keep my eyes open. I'm going to educate myself about this situation. But to legislate it just seems so wrong, and especially to tie their livelihood to it, to tie their livelihood to this license.
Because they can't get their CDL if they don't pass the test. Dave, you hit on a topic that I want to continue talking about when we come back. Let's talk about that. What if your driver license was connected to a human trafficking awareness test that you couldn't pass? What happens if the legislature says, you know what, we're going to expand this beyond truck drivers. We're going to make every person who has a driver license in the state of Utah take this mandatory test. And if you don't pass it, you don't get your license.
That is
Send us a text.
Man, that's a scary question. It's 8:17. You're listening to Dave and Dujanovic.